to the Creative Moment Season 6, Episode 8. I'm Dante Bullhauer, your co-host. Jamie Bullhauer, your other co-host. We have another special guest today with us. So before we introduce him, we'll go ahead and crack these. And then this is Kevin Delaney. Is that how you say it?
Yep.
All right. Kevin is a writer. He has a lot better connection with Jamie here, so I'll go letting you.
Yep.
You can set the stage for it.
All right. So many in the social media world know KP Delaney as the junk poet. I am reading his book right now, The Impossible Knots. This happens to be my basketball tournament book. So I'm reading this in between games. So lots of people are staring at me and looking at while I'm reading this book. So I'm about halfway through. Because I bring books at different things like that. We're going to talk about creativity and stuff just like we do. So welcome. Good to have you in this.
Hello.
So why don't you start with give us a little bit of your creative history, and probably because you'll probably answer it within there, like what is your definition of creativity?
Okay, so it took me a long time to realize what creativity was because I think it was something that was always part of me as a creative, and so I guess I see it as like it's a perception of reality through the lenses of our senses. So the way we perceive, sounds and sights, and I guess you could smell art, but so it's the only way I've been able to stop time is through the creative process, and that's why I love it so much, because you can go to that space and it's always there, and it's a sacred thing to be able to have that. So I'm thankful for it. It's a blessing and a curse, as I'm sure you guys can attest to, being fellow creatives. So yeah, it's like a never-ending balance between love and war. So
How did you get started with the creative kind of realm? Was it early on? Was it kind of more as you were an adult? How did that kind of process start to play out?
through music early on. I've always had a passion for music. So I was in bands in high school, and that was my first initial. And I was always into literature, and so that was my introduction. So I was obsessed with Bob Dylan and the poetry in his music. And I always found it weird. I don't really listen to lyrics. I feel the music. So I'm very bad at memorizing song lyrics. Like my wife will listen to a song and be able to memorize the lyrics, and I get so entranced in the vibe of the music. I get lost and don't even really listen to I hear it, but I'm not listening, if that makes sense. It's more of a feeling for me. So that's when I don't consider myself a very good musician. I love playing music. But then when I found poetry and began writing fiction just through blogging and stuff like that, that's when I fell in love with the word side and piecing together, pictures with words on canvas.
So do you, I asked this of our last guest too, because I saw an interview with Ray Bradbury, and it was found really interesting. In that interview, he said it took him about 10 years of writing short stories and stuff for him to finally feel like he had found his voice, and that a story was truly his, like, this is my style. And I think now, especially, your poetry and things like that has a very unique style and stuff. But was there a moment in your path that you had that epiphany, like, oh, this is me, this is my vibe?
I didn't really feel that until the poetry circuit that we found on Twitter, where we met one another. That was when I really found, like, okay, this feels like something I can actually do. It makes sense in my head. I can feel confident in it for the most part. I never felt that like in writing literature, and definitely not in songwriting. So that like the past few years, when I found poetry, that's when I found my place as a writer that I feel. So
Okay. What would you say is the hardest part of the creative life, and then also the biggest benefit or reward for you?
the hardest part is knowing when something is done. Uh, because you could go back through, and I do this with poems I've thought were done, and then you look at them a year later and you're a completely different person, and you're like, why didn't I tweak that, or yeah, but and so you can't do that. But so I think that's the when you finish something and feel good about it, that's the most rewarding part. But yeah, the hardest part is considering it done, calling it good, and moving on.
Yeah, so there's this quote that one of my favorite photographers uses a lot that says, "Done is better than perfect," and it's towing the line between I know I can do better, but I will always be able to do better on this specific piece of work. Just put it out there and do better on the next one. So, what kind of you talked about feeling good about it? What does that mean to say, okay, I'm okay with this being done and not perfect, and being able to say, I can hit publish, I can post this, it meets that standard that you're willing to put it out there into the world?
Sometimes it's just time. Like a lot of times the days go fast. I have a 5-year-old and a family, and so poetry is almost it. Sometimes it happens too fast. I think of that Ezra Pound poem, "The Station in the Metro," and I guess it started out like this massive poem, and he whittled it down to those two lines. And that I took a writing class in college, and that poem has always just struck me as so beautiful, because it's the fight. You can just, and I've looked at different versions of the process of that piece specifically, and you could just see the fight that the artist is having. Like, is it, and then to call it done after 2 lines when you started out with so much, the confidence of that is astounding to me. So yeah, yeah, I don't remember what the original question was after that, but
What was your standard for being done? But let's piggyback. So who are some of your heroes or people that you look up to in regards to the creative world, the literature world? I mean, I know that I've read a lot because I catch your references and stuff. But who's your heroes in this circle?
Bob Dylan was a huge influence early on. I love Salvador Dali. Ray Bradbury, you reference him. He's one of my favorite literature writers, and some of his science. He got me kind of into the science fiction realm. But some of his Greentown, Illinois series it's like a time machine that you could go in, and especially growing up, being a boy through the summers, and just all that youth that he captures, the magic of youth in his writing has been a huge influence. Ernest Hemingway. I like Georgia O'Keeffe. A lot of the colors, and just astounding stuff. The skulls, and just the different culture that she brings. There's so many people running through my head right now. I love learning, like when you find a new band and just going through the discography. There's a band called Typhoon that I've known about for a long time, and I'm going through their albums one by one right now, and I just love doing that, picking apart like their and finding their influences, and then just tying that whole web together, and then bringing that whatever I feel from that, and putting that into my art.
Yeah, so the creative world is a lot of highs and a lot of lows, right? And so everybody goes through, the adversities of creativity, whether it's burnout or external factors, whatever. So when you hit those moments of whether it is burnout or whatever sort of aggregate adversity, what kind of keeps you going and propels you forward through those? Is it going back to the artists that you like and just kind of getting replenished through their work, or what does that look like when you kind of hit a rut?
That's where like the writing community on Twitter has been so helpful, because the different daily prompts, and there's always something. There's writing is alive there, and that's cool. And you have a voice, and you can, if you're feeling kind of in a rut, that's when you write something quick, and that's where, and if somebody likes it, you get a quick buzz off that. And with that aside, I would say, like, when you find something new, when you discover something you've never discovered, like completely a wilderness, and you find yourself in it again and excited again, influenced and stuff like that, that's the exhilarating stuff that gets the juices flowing again.
Yeah. All right, let's spend just a couple of minutes talking about this book, okay? Because it happens to be something tangible in the sense that, again, I'm reading it during the basketball tournaments and stuff. So this was written right during the pandemic.
Yep.
Okay. What was the genesis for this specific story showing up during that time? And don't give away the ending. Don't give away the ending, because I'm only halfway through.
Yeah, I don't even remember how it ends, so you're in luck. It was a story I'd been trying to write for a really long time, and I started it, and I wasn't quite ready. That's another thing I love about art and creativity. You can see yourself in it, and so I probably started this initially 6 or 7 years ago, and then life happens and you get busy, and writing went away. I kind of got away from it, and then when the pandemic hit, I just I decided I'm quitting, like Netflix. I'm quitting all the the things that aren't feeding me in a good way, and I started listening to audiobooks, because I didn't have time to read. And I had a newborn baby. Noah was born September of 2019, so he was young. So I would take him and my dog on morning walks, and I would I started with Ray Bradbury, Dandelion Wine, and Something Wicked This Way Comes. Yeah. And I was so inspired by those stories that led to me writing music again. And then the music I was writing, I tried to write a song a day about whatever I had listened to on my walk that morning. And that was the challenge. You have one window, one song, get it done, and then move on. And then that got me into writing. I rediscovered this text that I had, an old file, and I'm like, oh, this is not bad. I'll never call it good, but this is not bad. So that led to this story, Impossible Knots, and and the things that happen in life, you can't necessarily undo them, and that's kind of the theme of the story. So that's where the story was born.
Yeah, I kind of like sometimes you aren't ready for the full expression of the poet or artistic expression. Like that's something very. I'm gonna stay with the story though, so I'll have a little fun with this. First off, what is the symbolism or metaphor that you're using with the busted up piano? Do you remember that? Remember his friend?
Oh yeah.
Paul, and then he's trying to redo the art in his house with. Yes. So like I think I have an idea, but I got the chance to talk to the author, so we're gonna.
So that my friends and I were moving a piano, and I don't think I'll never do that again. It's in the house. I'm not sure how we're gonna get it out of the house now, but we almost dropped it. And I said, like, and then I kept thinking about, imagine if we dropped. So a lot of of that scene was me and my friends, like, we're gonna die. Like, this is like, 'cause we were lifting it from a pickup truck onto my front porch, and it was just there's like 2 foot gap between the top step and the edge of the truck. And there was a moment where, like, everything, like, I felt time stop, like, in my friend's face is like, this is going, and we got it, we did it. But I wrote the other side of the story. We didn't drop it, and I could have, like, so then I just had fun with the imagination. And one of my dad's good friends is an artist, and he plays with different things, and mostly with painting. But I love one of my favorite things about Salvador Dali is how he combines, like, objects, like the lobster telephone type deal. So I wanted to create something with that destroyed piano that played so many beautiful things. Like, it's not dead. Nothing is ever truly dead unless you let it die. And that's where that came from. So he turned it into this piece of art.
Okay, that's kind of what I was saying, because it's sitting there in the middle of the road, and all the pieces are everywhere, and then the protagonist shows up to his house, and he's making it art, and I was like,
yeah.
Okay, all right. This last thing about the book, because I just had to laugh. So I want to know, did your handle, Junk Poet, start before you wrote the book, or is the moment when he's got his poetry all balled up in the trash can and he says it's filled with junk poetry? Which one came first?
The book came first. Yeah, I didn't even tie that together. After I finished the book, I created a blog on Tumblr, and it was called, I wanted to call it something like that sounded quick and fun, but also, like, had depth to it. So I came up, it used to be called Emotional Trash. And I'm like, that's too, like, emo, and, so I just did like a synonym of that, junk poetic. So that's where that came from. So I don't even remember that. So subconsciously, yes, it probably came from that, I think, because there is, and this is one of my favorite things about art, is the things we don't realize that are there every day that come out. The things that are so, there's, I don't know, you haven't got to the part where there's tea. And this, I did not plan on talking about this, but I came up with these names of teas, and one of the teas that he drinks is hot cinnamon sunset. And this had been sitting on the top of my stove every day since we moved in here. We've been here 9 years now. And I had no idea until after, like, a year after I finished the book. I was like, how long has this been here? And my wife was like, I thought that's why you put it in. And I'm like, I had no idea. So I probably subconsciously knew, but so that's one of the things that we absorb, that come out when we put the pen down to paper or the brush to the canvas. Any form of art, that it all comes out one way or another, which is really cool.
Yeah, Stephen King actually talks about, to a degree, he was asked about how do you build in your metaphor, and he goes, I write, and then in the editing I notice. So if somebody's wearing red, like if red shows up, then I actually have to figure out what my muse was trying to tell.
Yeah.
So I just laughed. When I came across that and the trash pail full of junk poetry, I was like, oh my gosh, because that's fun too as an author, dropping Easter eggs or stuff like that.
Yeah, for sure. I do that, but that was not planned. Good find.
Yeah, so call yourself the junk poet. Not really.
It's okay.
I don't have the context, but so if you had to give like an elevator pitch of like, this is my style of writing. If someone was asking like, what's your style? Elevator pitch, what would you say are kind of some I guess, buzzwords or phrases that you would use to describe that?
I try to be like realism. I don't want to say Bukowski because that's too like that happens all the time, and I hadn't gotten into Charles Bukowski until after I started writing poetry. So but I've read some of his stuff and I really love that gritty realism of everyday life, like your house before friends come over, the the stain on the coffee table. I have this obsession with Formica countertops, as that's in Impossible Knots, and I write about wood paneling because that was what my living room growing up, and just alarm clocks blinking, and just the like blackout power outage, and then it comes back on. Just stuff like that. That's an everyday that everybody can relate to, but they don't necessarily notice it, and that's what I want my poem to feel like something that somebody's lived, because I have lived. But you can also, as a creative, we can play with it and bend the truth a little bit and make it more theatrical, which is the beauty of it.
So with that, staying kind of on the style, I noticed to a degree, especially poetry wise, but even in the Impossible Knots, you have a underlining theme a lot about the heartache of relationships. And not saying that you don't talk about the joy either. And I mean, there's some good, but you know what I'm saying? Like, there's always, it feels like to a degree, there's always and maybe it is the reality, because even when you're in love, there's rough spots. It's not all rainbows and unicorn burps. So do you feel like you do that, or again, is that kind of just the emotion of the moment, the prompt? We get those each week on the back. So
yeah, I've always been attracted to that style, that unrequited love. I find such a beauty in that tragedy in a way. So that's kind of the well. I try to keep that well and feed that, because I just like that. It's raw, and and I dealing with people and feeling sadness from others, and doesn't always have to be myself. I'm just so attracted to the ache of that sort of sadness in a way. Yeah.
You do it well. Okay, honest moment just is when I first started reading you. We started first connecting with Move Me Poetry. I did not know that you were married and that you had a family. I thought that you had your heart broken so bad that you were not in any relationships. Like, I was like, man, this is heart-wrenching. Like, and so
Yeah.
then as I got to know you, it was just like, it's one of those cases to where, like, as the artist and what you show the world is a little bit different than what you live each day.
For sure. It is a Jekyll and Hyde thing. It's again that contrast of objects, light and dark, past experience, stuff like that. Having your heart broken was one of the best things and the worst things that'll ever happen to somebody. And just growing up, feel those feelings, and that was an initial muse to feeling lost and in love, and trying to make sense of that was a huge influence to when I started this whole journey. And then when you rediscover it, it's like I said, there was a good 5-year gap when I didn't do, I did a little bit of music and stuff like that, but then you reopen it and you're like, oh my God, I'm still bleeding. Yes. Like that's always going to be there. And people, I guess I mean that in a good way. Because you carry experience with you. And so it's fun to be able to relive things, but also be in control. Like, I know what I'm doing this time. I've lived and learned through this, and now I can kind of paint it how I want to, and I can kind of bend the sadness and, make it appear more dramatic in a way.
Yeah. And that's an emotion that sticks with you. I mean, whether you're still heartbroken or not, that type of emotion is something that's kind of, you can go back and tap into it anytime.
You play a certain song and it's, it's like, oh, next, like, or like, let's feel this. So that was, in music, in literature, they're therapy for me too. So in doing, in embracing other people's art, you're kind of one with it. There's such a oneness to it that is really incredible to be part of.
Yeah. So I'll ask my last question.
Okay.
You can go.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. Because we got about like 8 minutes left.
Yeah. 9:15.
Yep.
So, what would your advice be to someone maybe aspiring to be a poet or musician, a creative, that doesn't really know how to tap into that emotion, whether it be being scared of, having to work out there for everybody, or just kind of the fear of where to begin? What would your advice to someone that would maybe be just starting out in this kind of creative world be?
Just to start, if write a poem, or I would love to be able to. I'm terrible with drawing. I love the Teach Me Tuesdays used to do, and in a lot of those I'd have to trace and then like make it look like I didn't trace because I'm so terrible with that. But I love that you find your niche, find what works. So yeah. One would be, run far from that, get out, don't be a poet. But no, I'm just kidding. That there's a real magic to it, and when you find it, it's the best thing ever. So just to start, and find an influence, and find why you're there, the reason you're there in the first place.
Okay, all right. I'm gonna hit you with the hardest question for the podcast, and we are running out of time, but that's okay. All right, so there's a huge debate on Twitter, or the app formerly known as Twitter, in regards about poetry. So, in your view, is there too much poetry now?
No. Too much poetry.
Too much poetry. Like, we're deluded with, like, it's just, there's so much of it that it's hard to find the good stuff. Like,
there's a barrier to entry now that is so low that sometimes I do feel the creative market can be very saturated, but at the same time, go ahead.
Yeah, like too much for who? Like, that's I guess everybody has a voice, but I don't think that's a bad thing. Like, as long as they're, not using that voice in the wrong way. I don't think writing a poem is anything I want to stop anybody from. But that is a hard question. It's a saturated market for sure. But I've found some amazing poets and friends through that experience. So no, I will always fight for the poem and the people that write them.
Okay. All right. Well, we still have enough time. What is your biggest dream, your biggest goal in regards to your creative life?
To never lose it again. Losing, giving. I used to say, that was a past life, and it was stupid because then there was a time that I lost myself, and I was like, and then I've rediscovered myself through Impossible Knots and finding poetry. And, Impossible Knots is what led me to Twitter, because I thought, this is the best thing ever. I got to tell everyone on social media. And then what happened was I kind of walked away from that, and I've rediscovered finding the joy for writing literature. I've gotten back into that. But poetry was so perfect because it's just these snapshots of raw, real feeling that was so awesome. And to be a part of that community where we got to share it with one another was one of the most profound experiences of my life, and will always be. So, yeah.
Yeah, and for our viewers and stuff, referencing the nonprofit organization Move Me Poetry, which now though is no longer, but we're trying to keep that flame alive in different ways. With that, that time, even though I was only to a degree in it for a little bit there at the, you guys have been around for a couple years before I really.
Yeah, the inception was October of 22, I think, but they had Poetry Battle Fridays is what that spawned.
Yeah.
Spawned poetry. I came in at the very end of that. So it was about 2 years that Move Me Poetry existed. So you were there for most of it, I thought, but.
Well, I get a little bit more than I thought, but I mean, I was really involved, really at the end with the lessons, and doing the kickabouts, and so
it was a lot of fun.
Getting back, like jumping in to the full experience, with that. All right.
Yeah.
Thanks for being on our little podcast. It was awesome to get to talk to you.
So fun. Thank
Yeah.
you.
What's your handle on Twitter?
Okay. Yeah.
Well, I was just saying.
Oh yeah. Go ahead. Tell our viewers.
Junk Poetic. Are you talking to him, the Suns fan?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Celtics
he's actually he is a Jersey guy.
You did say that.
Yes.
I'm a hat guy.
Yep. He's a hat guy. You're the Jersey guy. Yep.
But yeah,
I gotta say, Jamie, I'm not wearing a hat tonight, and it's completely despite you.
Yes, but most of your cool visuals for your poems, and no sprinkles. I would have died if you'd had sprinkles at the beginning of this.
Next one.
Well, Kevin, thank you as always for coming on. Had a great time. We'll link all your socials, blog, Twitter, all that stuff in the description, and we'll see you guys in a couple weeks.
Thank you.